Welcome to Attican Plays Railway Empire.
All right, this is Attican, and welcome to another Railway Empire video. I'm kind of enamored with this pass-through rural station approach, and I wanted to run another test. So I wanted to go back and do another scenario that seemed to give people a lot of trouble back when the game came out. The black gold scenario. So we're going to go through the black gold scenario.
This was all undeveloped open prairie. Progress is unstoppable, and we are approaching a new century with giant strides. Now it's time to open up the oil fields in Texas.
Okay, so we're going to do this scenario with this new technique, this pass-through rural station. And I'm going to try my best to really follow the technique and use it everywhere it's applicable and deviate where I need to for the sake of the scenario. And we're just going to see how well this works out. So for those of you who aren't familiar, I have other versions of this. You can go out and see the scenario played a slightly different way and learn more about the scenario. This is not about the scenario. This is about the testing this technique. So first thing we're going to do is set up what would be different for me. This is going to be a beer-to-beer line between Salina, and yes, I am trainable. I can learn how to say that name correctly, from Salina to Kansas City. Our first goal here is to grow Kansas City quickly. We have to get it up to 60,000 population very, very quickly. It's one of the two harder goals in this particular scenario. The other hard one is growing your freight income up to 2.5 million per quarter. That comes down the road. We're working toward that already, but that'll come down the road. So here we go. We're setting up our pass-through rural station. So we're going to go Salina to the wheat, to Kansas City, back to the wheat. And that way we get wheat being delivered to both cities. They're both beer cities. And there I made a horrible mistake. Put in the comments if you notice what I did that was wrong. That was just, oh my, that was such a goof. Okay, so we're going to run 4 trains back and forth between these two cities. They will be full all the time. That's the theory behind this whole idea is you're going to have full trains because you're going to get passengers and goods from the city. Then you're going to top off with the at the rural station that you pass through and go to your other city full. So this is like our pass-through warehouses, only treating these little stations as little mini warehouses. So now we're going to go to the extreme. We're actually going to backtrack and pick up the meat, the cattle rather, excuse me, and run our first line between Wichita and Kansas City. Now we definitely want a line between Wichita and Kansas City because Wichita produces meat. And we need the meat for Kansas City to grow. Remember, our first objective is to grow Kansas City. But we're going to actually backtrack so that this line serves a dual purpose. It not only gives us the transfer of the meat and passengers and mail over to Kansas City and, you know, beer coming back to Wichita, that's all good. But it also picks up the meat, or the cattle rather, from that ranch. On the return from Kansas City back to Wichita, it'll pick up the cattle for Wichita. So it's serving a dual purpose. And that's kind of one of the things about this technique is every line is a dual purpose. It's a city-to-city line, and it's bringing in raw materials. And here I kind of got lost and kind of couldn't figure out where Kansas City was, but I finally figured it out and clean up the line. But you can see we're kind of going backwards. We've added another, I don't know, 100 miles to the trip or so just to be able to pick up that cattle, but now we haven't had to build a different set of line. Now this one was an extreme case for using the pass-through, but it worked just fine. So you know, you could argue that it would have been just as maybe better to just forego the pass-through there and just run a direct line since there wasn't anything good to pick up. But be that as it may, it still worked. So, of course, we're already in debt. We're already taking out all the bonds we can because we know we'll spend that money as quickly as can be. So set up our signals and set up our next pass-through. And I still haven't quite gotten in a rhythm for this, particularly for putting in the towers. Here I do put towers in, but in fact here I'm going back and remembering I didn't put towers on the first line. but I will put them on the second one. And I'm still, like I said, getting a rhythm for this. So if I keep playing with this style, eventually I'll get a rhythm where I make this mistake less often. Still will make the mistake, but hopefully less often. So now we set up city, I did it backwards, but I got it straight. City to cattle to city to cattle, and run the trains back and forth. And of course, on the one from Wichita to Kansas City, it's just going to be like a regular city to city line because Kansas City doesn't need the cattle. But on the return trip, of course, it will pick up cattle for Wichita. And there we've got meat and beer being exchanged between those two cities, which is just what we would want to foster growth for both of them. Now here's another one. We're going to take Fayetteville, which has a lumber industry, needs logs. We're going to go up. This is one of the keys. If you've watched the other video I did, or one of the other ones on this one, that lumber is one of the keys to getting Kansas City to grow fast enough to meet your needs. So we're going to take the approach of hooking up a city-to-city line with Fayetteville and using that to get our lumber over to Kansas City and also to Fayetteville. Oh, and you also notice I'm using the small stations as the pass-through, and that you could see where, oh, that's not going to work, it's going to cause a bottleneck. It doesn't. It does not. Everything works just fine. But so I'm using a single, and the reason I'm using the singles is just pure money. We don't have that much money to start a scenario. We want to get as much done as we can. And keep in mind, we are in our first month, and we've already connected. Once we build this little line right here, we're going to share this line. But once we do this little connection, in our first month of business, we will have connected 4 cities to our network, and 3 rural stations already to our network. So that's the whole thing, is by laying a small amount of track, going a little out of our way for that cattle. But by doing it this way, we've actually, once we get this little line set up here, we will have, like I said, connected 4 cities and 3 rural stations already to our network, and we're just now starting our second month of operation. Because this scenario, most of them started in January. This one actually starts in July. So we start in July of 1890. Okay, so there we go. Now once we set up this line, put in some towers, and get our trains on this line, we'll have our 4 cities and 3 stations set up already. And again, all these trains that we're running, this will make, I don't know, maybe 12 trains total that we're running. Every one of them is going to run full or very close to full every time they pull into a station. Maybe the exception would be Wichita going to Kansas City through the cattle would probably not be full all the time because, again, the cattle's not needed in Kansas City. So we did our Fayetteville to Kansas City logs, so now we're going to do our Kansas City to Fayetteville logs. And copy those trains. And that'll give us 12 very profitable trains running. And all this in basically July, August, and now it's the end of September. So basically in 3 months, we've gotten these lines completely set up and ready to roll. A little short of money. Would have loved to have had that research, because that's a freight increase. And the hardest thing in this mission, once you get Kansas City growing and you do a good job on that, the hardest thing on this particular scenario, not mission, scenario, is as I said, that freight revenue. So anything that can give you a freight revenue bonus is a great thing. Now here we've got two together, and I kind of thought about doing one large train station. Decided no, I'd rather just stick with the smalls. Double checking to make sure what we've got to do. So our task here early are grow Kansas City to 60,000, connect 6 cities to our network, and to have a long track line of a total of 4,156 miles, so over 4,100 miles of track we need to lay. And we've got, this is the thing about this, and this is why this method's working so beautifully, we have until 1892 to finish the Kansas City growth task. Now, as we know, to get a perfect score, we need to do that in about half the time. So we got the second half of 1890, 1891, and 1892, so 2.5 years. So we really will finish it a little over a year. So sometime around 1891, about August or September would be our target for finishing the Kansas City growth. And then the 6 cities, we got to 1894, which is 4.5 years, so somewhere around a little over 2 years we'd want to be done with that. And then the 4,000 miles of track we've got till 1898, which is, what is that? That's 7.5 years or whatever. We got a ton of time to do that, and we'll finish all these early. I'll just give you a spoiler alert. So now we're setting up a sugar line. We've got that sitting there. We might as well grab it. We're going to run a sugar line between Kansas City and down to Fayetteville. We could have run it over to Wichita just as easily, or in fact, we could have run it to in fact, I take that back. I think maybe that is where I'm going with this. Sorry, obviously I'm doing a voiceover after the fact here. I forgot what I was doing. Oh, this is, I'm sorry, forgive me. This is the corn line, and you can see, by the way, I pulled that. I was actually, it's funny, I was actually trying to make my mind up which way I wanted to go, so I decided to go to Wichita. And we'll cross over the existing track there and go into Wichita. And I kept with the new fancy crossovers. And again, if you build a bridge, that's fine. It might be better. You avoid an intersection. But I'm finding that as long as your traffic isn't ridiculous, these flat crossovers work just fine. And they kind of look better because you don't get these bridges all over the place. And they're cheaper. So there are reasons to use them. So here we go. We're going to run a line, corn line from between Kansas City and Wichita. And really, I guess that would be a good point too. When you're trying to decide which way to go with some of these, it's the best one to grow is your beer meat line, because the more it grows, the more that's the one you really want to make sure your beer and meat cities are working great. But here we go. We've got now we're going to set up. Once we have enough money, we'll set up this corn line. That'll give us 4. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm thinking about the last one I did where you had to connect up all those rural stations. That's not a point in this one, but this will give us 4 rural stations we got connected up. And here we see a bonus. Those bonuses, when you can get a bonus, grab them. And I'll show you in part 2 of this. I'll show you a really cheesy little thing I do that I just kind of discovered and a really cheesy little trick on these bonuses. Now, it's cheesy enough that you just connect them and grab the bonus and sometimes don't use them, but I'll show you something even cheesier later on in part 2. So there we go. We got our bonus, but we're not going to do anything with it right now. We want to get back to what we were originally working on. finish off this line here with the corn. Because we know it'll be a profitable line because both of those cities need corn. And here I thought I would show how to do the double crossover. You have to see how you have to kind of pull away from the first cross, and you can make it work with the flat crossover, but it has to be away from the first one. So you kind of have that little separation there as it crosses over, and it's not real aesthetically pleasing, and I hope they're able someday to fix that, but it's no big deal. It certainly works. And you can just run your track all the way across rather than having to tie it off on either side and put in signals and stuff. You can have a single line going across there. You can have your two double tracks crossing each other. They just don't quite look, they don't look quite as pretty, but not bad. And there I was thinking, well, it'd be nice to run that milk into Kansas City, but then I realized I haven't really finished that line off because I only connected on one track, and so there's no way to build a complete track from Milk to Kansas City and back. I don't have a return lane set up yet, so I have to come back to that because I do want to finish off. So I kind of got distracted there again. I do want to finish off this corn line. So our money is still slow. I mean, we're only in our seventh or eighth month. Our money is still not quite there at that point where we're not having to worry about it anymore. We're still having to wait on it. But I think even at that, you can see how it's picking up. The money's starting to come in more steadily as we build more profitable train lines. And these trains are rolling more frequently into each of the stations. So we're starting to see the money come in at a better clip. And Kansas City's growing. It's almost at its 60,000. And now we've got another connection bonus, and we've got sugar down here. This is the one I thought I was on a little bit ago. So now we can do sugar, and we can run that down to Fayetteville. We could have run it, of course, over to Wichita again, but these lines are now starting to compete with each other for the mail and passengers. So, you don't, in the early going, you don't want that because we want those full trains. And I'll talk about it in part 2 in more depth, but the kind of the thing you have to do with this technique, this is a great early game technique. There are other things we would want to consider in either later game or in to grow cities bigger. But to grow cities fast early, this technique works beautifully from what I can see so far. And we'll see how this one turns out as we run this test. So again, I'm trying to be really faithful to this strategy and really test it out and use it. And so I'm really making a point of doing these pass-throughs. But really, if we were a little more task focused, we would be saying, you need to go get your 5th and 6th cities connected up to your network. You need to build, well, I'm building tracks, so that's a good thing. But the other side of this is we're so far ahead of schedule right now. And we are, you can just see it. We're way ahead of schedule. We're doing great here. And I think, again, it's because this technique allows us to get those rural stations feeding goods into these cities and gets our city-to-city lines together more cheaply than if we build a city-to-city line and separate rural station lines. So, and just as an example, look at Kansas City, where could build a line and run wheat into Kansas City. We could run sugar into logs into Kansas City, sugar and wheat and milk, right? And we could have separate lines doing all those. But the way we're doing it, not only are we setting up all these lines to run into Kansas City, but we're running these lines into other cities as well. So these rural stations are able to feed goods and grow the other end of the Kansas City connection, so to speak. And now we're just accelerating our growth of our whole network because all of our cities are getting goods, and we're running more profitable trains than we would be if we were just running the trains that are running full from each of these rural stations into Kansas City to grow it. Okay, so there's another line down. So now we've got like 20 trains running, and there goes our growth of Kansas City. We hit it in May of 1891, which is excellent. It's right where we needed to be. So there's one down, and we've got 2 more to go in our first set here. We've got to get our 6 cities connected and our 4,100 miles. So I'm deciding where I want to go next. And again, this is where this technique departs from our typical beer meat kind of strategy. We've got meat up here in Wichita, and there's meat down in Dallas. And if you've seen the other videos I've done about black gold, I want to use Dallas as kind of a focus point for the build. Kind of give us a southern headquarters, because down there is where all the oil is going to, a lot of the oil is going to pop up, and our ability to do things with it. So we're going to grow Dallas as sort of our southern hub, let Kansas City be our northern hub, if you will. And so this is where this technique departs from the way we've been doing this in the past. This is going to be a meat line between Wichita and St. Louis, but it'll be great because they both need cattle, and we're going to pass through that cattle ranch, so we can feed cattle back and forth to Wichita and Dallas. And you'll notice I picked up a different cattle ranch rather than the one that I'm using coming off of the Kansas City line. This one's actually one that's further down there, closer to Dallas. And a little bit of 6 and 1, half a dozen the other, but I think the production will match and peak out and make sure that we get enough going into Dallas by using this other one. Plus, it's just perfectly located, kind of more or less in the middle and more or less in a straight line between the 2 cities. So that's a good candidate. And here's just one of those acts of well, and I've lost the word. Anyway, good luck. Let's just call it good luck. I had a fancy word I wanted to use, and I've lost it. Anyway, Dallas now has a connection bonus, so that's lovely. They'll pay for a huge chunk of this track. This is an expensive line. It's a long way from Wichita to Dallas, but with that connection bonus, that's going to pay for a lot of this work that we're doing here, and especially if we straighten it out so our bridges are minimal, and that's a very reasonable track. So once we can gather up 100 and some thousand, we can make that connection, grab that bonus, and get that track paid for. And here's something that comes along beautifully. We get a professor. Now, these professors, you lose your innovation points, but you gain money. Right now, we need money. We're trying to get our economy really rocking and rolling, and money actually, in this case, is more important than innovation. Now, some of you may cringe at that and think, oh, you're trading away advancement for the sake of capitalism. Well, yes, you are. Yes, we are. We are capitalists. We are playing a capitalist game here. And the innovation points are very important, and we'll come back later. And we would rather, once our economy is really rocking, you wouldn't do that. You would say, nah, we don't want that professor. We don't want to give up our innovation points. However, we would be happy to have an inventor where we would spend some of the extra money we have to gain innovation points. So early in the game, depending upon the circumstances, of course, but early in the game, I generally like to use the professor to give me money, and then later in the game, I will use the inventors to spend the extra money that I have to then give us innovation. So you get your scientific innovation, but you do it later on when you can afford it. You don't try to force feed it and force it to happen before it's time. So now we want to get our 6th city set up. And we've got a perfect deal here because we've got a beer industry in Shreveport. We can have a beer meat line, and we can pick up that wheat up there and pass it between the two cities. They both need wheat, and especially Shreveport with the beer industry. So this is a beautiful place to pick up our 6th city, knock out that task, and have a very nice growth potential for Dallas and Shreveport. And again, remember, part of our strategy from not testing the technique, but from doing the scenario point of view, is to grow Dallas. And one of the reasons we have to grow at least one of our cities is that one of the optional tasks we have is to produce petroleum. And you don't get a refinery until at least one city on the map has hit 115,000 population, and therefore then has a demand for the petroleum. You don't have a demand prior to that. So you got to grow at least one city to 115,000 because your computer buddies certainly aren't going to do it. They can grow cities a little bit, but they will not grow them that big. So we're going to have to take care of that and grow one of our cities to 115,000. In our case, it's going to be Dallas. So there we got our connection bonus. You notice I did this one differently, intentionally to speed up when we got that. Since it was going from our 5th city to our 6th one, I did one way over to the rural station and then went ahead and did the single track over to the other side to get the connection just a little bit earlier. Didn't matter, but I wanted to get it as fast as I could. So now we'll go back and finish the double tracking all the way through. And now there we go. Now we've got our line, our 6th city to city line running, this time a wheat line between Shreveport and Dallas. And now I'm about to make a mistake. I'm about to push the envelope a little too far here. So we're going to expand Shreveport, and we're going to run a sugar line between Shreveport and Dallas, which is fine. So far, so good. New platform in Shreveport. Double track it up to the station, rural station. Perfect. Now run it around as a dedicated line. Go around that wheat and dedicate a line coming into Dallas. So far, so good. It'll be efficient. It'll work beautifully. We'll have to separate a little to get across that bridge right there, but no problem. Now we can come down to Dallas and we go, crap. Our Dallas line is the furthest line, that furthest platform to the left of that second station we put into Dallas. So I would have to redo that Dallas line to make that work. So I got lazy and decided to just tie off right there and just hook the line into the existing wheat line. Now, I do recall as I played this, I was thinking, well, we'll just see how well this works. And the answer is, oops. And there's one major mistake I make right here, and I'll point it out in a little bit. But at any rate, here we go. We've got a sugar line. It works just fine. I mean, it's going to go through that wheat station without stopping. And that in itself ought to tell you, you should have built a bypass. You should have gone around it. Yes, I should have. And I'll show you what the real mistake is that really causes it to die here shortly. So now we're going to look down here to Houston and say, hey, I can run a log line. There's logs down there south of Dallas, and I can run a line down to Houston and pick up another city and have another city-to-city line making money and shipping logs. And Houston's a pretty good size city. Dallas is going to be a large city, so this will be a really good profitable line, and we can get some logs going. And here again, forgot my supply towers. That Wichita to Dallas meat line doesn't have, or cattle line doesn't have supply towers on it as it should have. Shame on me. I think I got the same problem up there, Dallas to Shreveport as well. And I probably should note, we still don't have any maintenance on any of our stations, but that is not a mistake. That's by design. Got more important things to spend the money on right now than on putting maintenance in, but we will address that a little later. And there I see, I think I'm going to notice the problem that I created with my sugar line at Shreveport. Yeah, here we go. When you get those waiting for triangles with the train in them, those are bad. So we've got a problem here. And what's going on here is that there's a train wanting to go over to Williams Preserve, that's sugar, that train I'm about to remove. But there's a train blocking it because it's sitting there right in its intersection. Now, I could have made a super simple fix here if I had just had my brain on straight and moved that, gotten rid of that signal right there that's got that one train stopped. Because see, they're about to do it again. And see, they're blocking each other, and there's no resolution. There's no way to get around this. And all I'd have to do is move the signal back for that longer train, move it back to the right of our screen so that it's prior to that intersection, which is where it belongs anyway. If I'd done it correctly in the first place, that would have worked. And this whole problem would have gone away. That would have been all I needed to do to fix it. But I decided to fix it by making the wheat a double platform pass through, which is cleaner anyway, as we would know. Like having two tracks is better than having one when you're going in both directions. But I decided to just go ahead and make it a double track and clean it up that way. I'm still going to have to kill another train to do what I want to do because it's blocking the track and stuff I need to get access to. Now we get that super fast train that catches up with where he should be. And now the problem with this, of course, is that we've got this little mess where we've got our tracks separated from one another. So now we're going to try to do a merge to go across, and because the tracks aren't nice, clean, parallel, it's not going to work. So I'm going to have to do a little more cleanup to get this to work. So there, I got rid of all the track, and now I'm going to build my double track down to Shreveport coming out of that wheat. And I actually picked the wrong side here. So I'm going to have to correct my signals too, because the ones coming back are going to be going the wrong way. But no matter. See, now we see how we got both of them going one direction. So we flip them around, and because these are already on there, we'll have to manually flip all these down. And I wouldn't have to flip them all. You could do every other one or whatever. It really doesn't matter, but I decided to do it right and flip them all. So now they're all facing the right direction, and we've got track going, driving on the right on both ways. So now our wheat line is fixed and will work, but we still want our sugar line. So now we can merge into that double line. And by the way, another thing, design practice, don't do these, what I'm doing right here, don't merge so close to the station like that. That's a problem as well. It's not a good place to have a merge. But this will actually work. But what really, it wasn't the double track that fixed this problem. It was really having the signals correct, because now you can see I have the signals so that the trains were stopping prior to the intersection. Before, I had the trains actually stopping in the intersection. I had the train that was trying to go from Shreveport into the wheat stopping past the intersection with the sugar, and that's what was messing it up. So even though this fixed it, the real fix to this wasn't the double track and the double platform. In the wheat, the real fix was moving those signals to the proper locations so that they're back. They're not actually in the intersection. They're prior to the intersection. As you can see there, they look good there, and that's the way it should be. And I could have, like I said, I could have done all that fix by just simply moving a signal. But having a double track is fine, and having that double station probably makes sense given the fact that now we're running 6 trains through there, and we've got that intersection close by and all that. And then I finally realized, geez, I didn't even put a supply tower on this line. Way to go. So there, I finally do that. So now we've got 2 of our 3 done. Now we're going to look for a nice long line so we can finish off our track. And what we've got up here, we've got Denver way over here. Denver's just barely on this map. And way over here to the northwest, from this map's point of view, is Denver. And we're going to run a line. We notice that our competitors already got the wheat going in. That would have been our first choice of a rural station. But there's corn right there, so we're going to run a corn line between Denver and Salina. And that will give us a nice big long track. And by the way, when you have a track requirement, notice how this is single line going all the way over, nice long line. But you get credit for both tracks. So if when I double track this, well, I will almost, not quite, but almost double the amount of track that I've used. So there's 150 miles, just half of it. So it's about 300 one way, so it'll be about 700 miles. And right there, I was cussing myself. Did you see that? I built a tunnel for no reason through that mound, that little hill there, and could have gone around it so easily. I got sloppy there because the money's starting to get good. I don't know if you've noticed, but we're starting to make money. And the money's starting to come in much faster now. And that being said, I, of course, get sloppy because I don't pay enough attention to the cost of my track. Shame on me. But there it is. So I spent more money on that one piece of track than I needed to. Probably wasted $50,000 to $100,000. But at any rate, now we've got a nice big long set of track, but we didn't quite meet our goal. And you'll see, you'll see what happens here. It's kind of funny. So we're setting up our line between making sure we've got our signal set, both ends of this. And I actually, the western part of the map where you get a lot of that kind of golden looking ground, I find it very hard to see the signals. And that's why I had to zoom in there just to see if I actually had them set. I even remembered supply towers, so I'm getting better. Now we'll set up our pass-through line between Salina and Denver with a corn line. Set one up on the other way. This is a very long line, and it's we'll probably never come back to it as far as the scenario is concerned, so I'm going to go ahead and run 6 trains here and make some money hauling mostly passengers and some corn. Passengers, mail, and corn, rather. You can see the first ones are actually full or close to full, which is passengers and mail, but that'll thin out because these cities aren't that big. So now we'll grab the Columbia because that's a better freight train for the heavy oil that we're about to move. We're about to move into the oil phase here. But at this point, we're 8 miles short of our track goal. We got within 8 miles. So we're looking for one more thing to do. And real quick, we're just going to hook up corn down into Dallas on a short run, and that'll give us the track line. And I do want to wrap up this first one here and say that we have followed that, with the exception of this line I'm about to put in, we have done a pass-through rural station setup for every line that we've run. And in this limited amount of time we've had, it's April 1892. We started April 1890. So we've played the game for two years of game time. We finished all our first 3 tasks, which were supposed to be finished in let's see, 1898 in 7.5 years. So in 2 years, we've finished 7.5 years worth of work. So we're obviously way ahead of schedule. We're looking really good. The technique has worked beautifully. Our income is really starting to pick up now. And I hope you'll join me for part 2 of this when we finish off this black gold test of the pass-through rural station technique.
I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it'll help you become a better player, and I hope you'll join us for our next Railway Empire video. Thank you.